Shalom. This week we are beginning Sefer Shmot, the book of Exodus, the second book, the 5 books of Moses. And the children of Israel are in Egypt. And we read, Joseph died and all his brothers and that entire generation passed away. And in the meantime, the children of Israel were fruitful, teemed, increased, and became strong, very, very much so, and the land became filled with them. But for all practical purposes, this is the beginning of the exile. Children of Israel are now trapped in the land of Egypt, where they will be refined, where their inner essence will be honed, and where their spiritual nature will be perfected. In the meantime, though, one very pivotal verse greets us almost immediately. A new king arose over Egypt, who did not know of Joseph. He said to his people, Behold, the people, the children of Israel, are more numerous and stronger than we. Come, let us outsmart it, lest it become numerous, and it may be that if a war will occur, it too may join our enemies and wage war against us and go up from the land. And really, this is the moment when we read this verse, a new king arose over Egypt, who did not know of Joseph. If you had to really pinpoint a moment when you could calculate the beginning of the exile in a very severe way, it must be this verse. And this verse astounds us. There arose a new king over Egypt who did not know of Joseph. And there's a very famous controversy amongst the sages here that Rashi cites. Everybody knows this controversy. What does it mean, a new king who did not know Joseph? One opinion, one of the sages maintains that it means literally a new king, that there was a successor to the throne of Egypt, and this new king was not aware of Joseph. But the other interpretation is that it was actually the same king that had been Pharaoh in the time of Joseph, but that he made himself as if he didn't know who Joseph was. But either way, it's really quite amazing to us, because whether you say that it was a new king who hadn't heard about Yosef, or it was the same king, of course this sounds a lot more sinister, the same king who made himself as if he doesn't know Yosef, but either way, it seems to be such a tremendous, arrogant act of betrayal, and such an attitude of total denial of all the good that Joseph did. Joseph came along and literally saved the entire nation from extinction. He must have been a national hero of such an incredible level of prominence. He must have been a household word. He was a household word, because no Egyptian, according to Pharaoh's own decree, was able to literally move without Joseph's permission. And in order to survive, in order to live, it was necessary for each individual, each family, to have a relationship with Yosef. So whether it was a new king, or even if it was a new king, how could he not have heard of Yosef, who saved his entire nation? And how much more so if it was the same king who just decided, from this point on, I'm going to pretend that this never happened. And you know, there's all sorts of modern day insights and comments that we can easily interpolate onto this whole scenario as a template for the emergence and the development of anti-Semitism. You know, the Jew comes and he saves everybody, and he does this unbelievable thing for society, for civilization, and then when it's convenient, you forget about him. Okay, but that's on a very, very simple level. I want to share a very profound thought with you. You know that there is a concept in the Torah which we find consistently. It's called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. And this, our sages tell us, is a principle by which God administers justice and literally runs the universe. Midah keneged midah means measure for measure. It's a law of reciprocity, that the same measure by which a person conducts himself is literally meted out to him. And it's a principle of such profound preeminence in the Torah's philosophy. And we find some very famous examples of this. There are the examples of midah keneged midah in the Torah itself are too numerous even to mention. And some of the more blatant, obvious examples are the Egyptians that attempted to drown the Jews were themselves drowned. Yaakov, the patriarch Jacob, even though he was acting under the instructions of Rivka with prophecy, and even though he did the right thing, essentially he deceived his father into thinking that he was Esav with something that he was wearing, with a garment of Esav. And Yaakov himself was deceived with the garments. Yosef's garment was brought before him. So, midah keneged midah, this idea of a certain natural law by which Hashem in His infinite wisdom and with this perfect sense of justice, there's a cycle of things that go around and come around. So using that idea and realizing that it's everywhere and that it is such an important underlying principle of karma, as it were, in the Torah, and that we can always find this to be true, take a look at this incredible concept that we meet here in the very beginning of Exodus that is so astounding to us no matter how we slice it and no matter whose comments we adopt, this idea that there arose a new king that did not know Joseph. It just seems to us to be such a ridiculous proposition that a new king wouldn't have heard about the mainstay of popular Egyptian culture, the cornerstone of what made that nation great, Joseph. And again, how much more so, someone who just decided suddenly in midstream, well, I'm not going to pay any attention to that anymore. But you know what? Midah keneged midah. Measure for measure, there's something very astounding here. Because actually, even this idea of the new king who did not recognize Yosef is not new, but is actually an example of a punishment that was measure for measure. Because this is not new, and there was a precedence. Because Joseph's own brothers did not know him. And when we go back to Parshat Miketz, when they first came to the land of Egypt, we read right here, Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Now, what does that mean? It's not only a question of them not recognizing their own brother because he had changed, because he had a beard, because they weren't expecting him, whatever. That's not the point. That is just on that simple level. But on the deeper level of meaning, of what Joseph represents in the process of bringing about the redemption, and that insight into the inner struggle of the inner dimension of what the struggle between the brothers and Joseph was really all about, was that the brothers did not recognize Joseph's role and his importance and what he was trying to do to bring about the redemption. That's what it really means, that they did not recognize him. So here we are in Parshat Shmot. Joseph and his brothers, Jacob, that entire generation passed away. And now we're confronted with this incredible conundrum of the new king, or the old new king, who doesn't know who Joseph is. And we are just reacting with this tremendous indignation. What? How could that be? That's disgusting. What an ingrate. How ungrateful. What an anti-Semite. He doesn't know who Yosef was after everything that he did. Well, guess what? Paro could say, I don't know who Yosef is. You yourselves didn't know who Yosef was. You don't recognize Yosef. And it's such an unbelievable idea of midah keneged midah, because we bring everything upon ourselves. So it's only natural that Pharaoh, the new king, the old king, did not know Yosef, because the brothers themselves did not know Yosef. It's only natural that Paro should not recognize the greatness, the righteousness, the holiness of the tikkun, of what Joseph is trying to do in the world, because we didn't recognize it. And now, flip it over to the contemporary plights of the Jewish people in the world today, vis-a-vis the central role that the state of Israel plays in the unfolding saga of the redemption for the Jewish people and for all mankind. And there are so many voices in the world today that are against Israel, that rise up against Israel. But the problem is the Jewish people who don't recognize the greatness of Israel and what Israel is bringing about in the world today, and the phenomena of Jews, especially Jews that call themselves religious, that live in the diaspora, which is in itself a contradiction in terms for a Jew to live outside the land of Israel, and they're so critical of the land of Israel and the government of Israel, and they're so critical of what's going on here, and they're in such denial of what God is doing. And it's the same thing exactly, because Yosef is all about the world, the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, of bringing about the redemption through our own effort, of trying to do as much as possible to deserve the redemption by being participatory and by setting the stage for the next level of the redemption, which is the spiritual revolution represented by Mashiach ben David. In the meantime, the brothers, they're saying, you can't do this, this isn't the way. And they didn't trust him, they wanted to kill him, and they sold him because they felt this is not where the redemption is going to be coming from. Just like today there are people that say, no, God is not using the state of Israel, that's just a blip, which of course is such a tremendous heresy, because the state of Israel is the greatest act of reconciliation and kindness that God has done for the Jewish people and for the whole world. And so Paro comes along with his tremendous arrogance and says, I never heard of Joseph. Well, he learned from the best, because it was Joseph's own brothers who did not recognize him. So this is a chilling example of Midah Keneged Midah, and the lesson, of course, for us to realize is that the hand of Hashem is upon us in everything, and that the process that is being played out every week for us in the Torah portions is the process of modern history, the process of our lives. The challenge that we have is the challenge that Paro failed, and unfortunately the challenge that before that Joseph's own brothers failed, which is to recognize what Hashem is doing and not to deny it, so that we can save ourselves from the cycle of measure for measure, but rather we can reap the blessings of the good measure that will be meted out to Israel, to the whole world, when we recognize the chesed, the kindness, the hand of God upon us in the process of the redemption, which is the main theme of everything we're going to be reading about in the book of Exodus.